Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Perlya, and this is going to be a super in-depth video about how I play Zac and make the best out of the champion. And I just want to put a little disclaimer before I start that this is how I think, these are my opinions about how to play Zac the best. Please don't be offended if you don't agree with my points. Like, no hate please, okay? But without further ado, let's begin. So this is going to be a super in-depth guide, so I will put timestamps down below if you want to skip certain parts or topics. I will try to make this video as simple and straightforward as possible, so it's very easy to understand everything and beginner friendly. In this video, I will go through 8 different topics, and first off we'll talk about his abilities and ability level order. Then we'll go through runes, jungle path, items and builds, weaknesses and strengths, champions to ban or champions that he has good synergy with, tips and tricks, and last but not least, I'll go through general jungle tips for season 10. This guide is both for new and older Zac players who want to abuse him in the new season, and with the new jungle changes, Zac is actually very good as long as you play him correctly. So a little background information about myself: I'm a Diamond 3 Zac OTP currently, and I've been playing him for a very long time. I've even cosplayed him. I do have a fair amount of things I want to share with you guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to leave a comment down below if you liked or if you disliked and disagree with my points. And without further ado, let's go through his abilities for you to understand how he actually works. So go through his passive. He splits into 4 chunks, 4 different blobs that will try to recombine, and if any of these blobs remain, he will actually revive with 10 to 50% of his health, depending on how many blobs survived. And the revival speed is also increased every 4 levels. So let's go through Zac's abilities. First off, we'll talk about stretching strikes. It's the kissing, the joinking, the annoying super long arm. Can you guess which ability it is? Ding 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 ding! Yes, Zac's Q. Zac stretches his arm in a target's direction, dealing a certain amount of damage depending on his ability level and of his AP maximum health. He can connect the Q to another target and fling them together. This is one of my favorite abilities since it's so troll, and I always feel like I make 2 enemy champions kiss when I fling them together, which is really funny. So on to the next ability. We have Zac's W, Unstable Matter. And in my opinion, this is one of the most OP abilities in the game if used correctly, because you can survive for so long. If you press W close to any target, you will deal damage and also regain HP back from the blobs that you can pick up. If you use W before picking up blobs, it actually reduces the cooldown of the ability, so you can spam it way more. Another good thing about his W is that you can actually walk through jungle monsters and camps if you W. This makes Herald super easy to take, since you can just walk back and forth through Herald and hit his back super easy. Onto the next ability, we have Zac's E, which is called Elastic Slingshot. This is the most important ability on his kit, because this is the ability that you use to disengage, engage, and also peel for your teammates, because it's very easy to only use it to engage, but if you save the ability in team fights, you can also actually save your backline quite a lot by jumping on champions that jump on your backline. So for the last ability, Zac's ultimate, Let's Bounce. Now reverted, by the way. But the ability makes Zac bounce 4 times and knocks back and deal damage to enemy champions. He gains bonus movement speed and can cast W while ulting as well. Enemies that are hit by his ult are bounced back for 1 second and then slowed for 20%. Also, if you hit one champion multiple times, they take 50 less damage for every bounce beyond the first one. So that's important to keep in mind. So when it comes to the skill level order, I always recommend going E first. Always, always, always. The reason why I always recommend going E first is because every time you level it, you'll get more range on the E, which makes it way easier to gank, and literally easier to do everything and jump to different places. The next ability that you level is W. You increase flat damage and percent max health for every level up, And this only has actually 4 seconds cooldown early, which makes this really good to spam with. And you can also use W while ulting as well. The last ability I recommend leveling is actually Q. For every level up, you do get more damage and cooldown reduction, but since this has more than 10 seconds cooldown early on, I don't recommend going this second because W is just way better since it only has 4 seconds cooldown early. So now when we go through which abilities to max first, you might be wondering, but which abilities do I start with? And let me tell you, I'll go through all of this when we talk about the different jungle paths that you can go on Zac, because this really depends on where you start. Sometimes you go W, Q, and sometimes you go W, E. But I'll explain all of this when we talk about the third topic, which is pretty soon. If you want to skip to that right away, feel free to do so. Now that we have a basic understanding of Zac's abilities, we can now move on to which runes that work best with Zac. So Aftershock is usually the main keystone that you go. It got nerfed a little bit with the flat resistances, but both flat damage and cooldown actually got buffed. So from 35 seconds, it now procs at 20 seconds, and damage now scales with bonus health rather than max health. So the main keystone is Aftershock. And after that, you usually go Font of Life, Conditioning, and Revitalize. Font of Life is good since the majority of Zac's abilities have CC, which means you will easily mark an enemy so your ally champs hitting the champion will gain HP back. Conditioning is mainly good since you will want to build some kind of AP on Zac, so getting more sustain and magic resist and armor stats in the runes will benefit you a lot. You can also go bone plating, but I would recommend going conditioning for the extra stats. Revitalize is also way better than Overgrowth in my opinion because it makes you heal way more from your blobs, which means you can survive for longer, and especially with the items that I will explain later on. So with the main runes being resolved most of the time, we should now move on to the second trees that you can go. But I would recommend either going Inspiration, Precision, or Domination runes. So for Inspiration, you want to go Cosmic Insight for the cooldown reduction and Magical Footwear to save 300 gold. You don't really need a lot of movement speed in the early levels, especially since you have a lot of gap closers on Zac. So that's why I always think Magical Footwear is a great choice to do. For the Domination tree, I would go with Sheep Shot and Ravenous Hunter for the extra healing. Sheep Shot is better than Sudden Impact because majority of Zac's abilities are impairing enemies' movements, and flat true damage is also better than lethality and magic penetration for 6 seconds on Zac. So for the precision tree, I would recommend going either Coup de Grace, Triumph, or Tenacity. The reason why I say Tenacity is because the rune skills for every minion and champ takedown that you do, and the CC reduction is very good so you can survive for longer and pick up your blobs. And when it comes to extra stats, I always say that it depends on which champions that you go up against. But usually you go with cooldown reduction, and then for the last two, you go either armor if the enemy is AD heavy, vice versa with magic resist. When it comes to the jungle path, you can go almost anywhere with Zac because of his healthy, jungle clear, and sustain. You almost always decide where to start in champ select since it's very situational with where you start. I never recommend going top off first since it will most of the times put your top laner behind since they tend to miss a few minions. Especially in lower elo. The easiest camps for Zac to take is AoE camps, for example Krogs, Raptors, and Wolves. So the jungle item that you will pick is Hunter's Talisman. With the new meta, focus is going to be getting bot lane ahead in order to secure most Drakes, which means you want to gank topside early to have ganked at least once and get an early top lead, and then focus bot side until Drake spawns at 5 minutes into the game. There are a lot of different jungle paths that you can go, and I'll talk about 4 different ones today. The first one is very beginner friendly and the safest ones to go in my opinion. In this path, you go E as your second level up, and this is because you mostly take AoE camps and you get 2 escapes in case the enemy jungler invades. So starting off with the blue side, you go red buff first with the help of your bot side, into Raptors, then Wolves, then blue buff, and then you either decide to gank or to do scuttle. And on the red side, you start blue buff with the help of your bot side into Wolves, Raptors, red buff, and then you either gank mid or top, depending which lane is pushed in the most, and either go and take Scuttle or go back to your Krugs. Good thing about these paths are that you secure both buffs, you get level 3 around 3 minutes, so you're able to do an early gank, and it is safer against aggressive enemy junglers. The next two paths that I will talk about are pretty similar, but one will be when you have the red side and the other one is when you have the blue side of the map. These paths are more advanced than the previous one I talked about, since you have to be quicker. On the red side, you go Raptors into red and Krugs, and then you gank either top or mid. So on the red side, you actually start Raptors alone, so you don't get a leash from your top laner, and then you go into red and then Krugs. And on the red side, you want to CC red buff with the help of Krugs. So because of this, you want to level up Q second instead of E. But on the blue side, you want to start red with the help of your bot side, and then you go into Gromp and blue and take them at the same time. After that, you either decide to go top side or mid, depending on which one that is pushed in the most. Pros with these paths are that they're very quick compared to the first one. You do get level 3 before 3 minutes. The cons with these paths are that they're more risky, since you might match the enemy jungler and you don't win a lot of 2v2s. You're also prone to vertical jungling, and it's also very situational because if you have a weak early laner, you will most likely only waste time since they will only be level 2 when you do the gank. A thing to keep in mind with the new season is that camps spawn faster now. Small camps spawn 2 minutes after you finish clearing them, and you also don't get catch-up XP anymore if you fall behind in levels, which makes decision making and not wasting time crucial. The next part we're going to be talking about is how you gank with Zac. So let's say you just finished taking Gromp and blue together and you decide to gank topside. The lane isn't going to be that pushed into either side, it's going to be pretty frozen either here or here. So there's literally no point trying to E into lane. As you can see, the E range is very short. So what you want to do here is instead, you walk around here. Let's say the enemy champion, this is the enemy champion right here. You don't E in, you don't do anything. Okay, since I've removed all the minions here, but let's pretend this is a minion. So, because they haven't cleared everything. So, you Q the minion first, you walk up to the person, and you Q them. If this person tries to flash away or use any dash, this is where you E. You don't use E to engage on an early gank. But what do you do if you're on red side then? So, if you just finished clearing either Krugs or red buff and you decide to gank top side, there are two different ways you can gank this early. If the lane is pushed into our turret, so let's say the enemy champion is right here and our ally is right there. What you can do is literally the same as the first one. You just walk here, walk up to the person, Q a minion, we pretend this is a minion, and just Q the person. But if it's the opposite and your top laner is pushing into the enemy top laner, let's say the enemy is right here and your ally is right there. If you start on red side now, as you can see, this is gonna be pretty hard to gank. The only scenario that you can get a successful gank here is if you literally stand right here in the top of this bush, and either if they walk up too close to this wall right here, you can hit them with your E, or if you manage to E in and then Q into a minion. Yeah, let's pretend this is a minion. So you basically Q the enemy champion into a minion. But most of the time I would not recommend trying to force a gank at level 3 since you're very squishy and you don't want to take any turret shots, and because you'll just be wasting time at the end of the day And when it comes to this season, you can't be wasting time. So in this scenario, if my top laner had pushed in like this, I would either know that the enemy jungle is going to gank my top laner, so I will still walk down into river and either ward or go take scuttle or decide to go and gank mid side instead. Now we've gone through the basics of how to gank at level 3 in top lane. I'm just gonna show you all the different spots in top lane that you can gank from. So right now I'll go through all the different ways you can gank from mid lane. We're now moving on to boss side and I'll show you all the different spots that you can gank from. When you decide to gank from spots like this with Zac, be sure to either have a sweeper or a control ward to be sure that they don't know that you're here. To make you understand how much of a ganking potential Zac actually has, I've drawn all of these circles on the map to showcase how many spots he can jump from. If you want me to do a more in-depth version of how to gank and ward with Zac, feel free to comment down below and I'll see if I can make another guide for that. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is items and what to build on Zac. So for items and building wise, you can go a lot of different items on Zac since he can be played as both full tank but also AP tank. But I never recommend going full AP Zac in ranked since you don't have the burst damage to make up for the squishiness. But Zac's core item is basically Cinderhawk, and then depending on the enemy team, you go either Randuin's, Deadman's, or Spear Visage if you want to go for the tanky early build. If you want to go for the AP early, I would go first Cinderhawk and then into Leandry's and maybe a Dark Seal. For boosts, I would always pick either Mercury or Ninja Tabi. You never go any other boost than these two. Like, don't fall into the cooldown reduction boost trap, you're saying. I see a lot of Zac players that like to build Warmog second. I would actually not recommend going Warmog second at all. As a third item, it's completely fine, but as a second item, you won't even get the passive for Warmogs, so this should be part of your build later on in the game. If you aren't behind early, I always buy Leandry second or third item since it's a really good item with both AP and HP. It works really well with Cinderhawk as well as Zac's AP scaling abilities. I would only recommend buying AP on Zac if you're even or ahead in the game. The AP items that I only recommend going is either Leandry's, Rylai's, Morello, Protobelt, or Banshees. These are the only items that work with Zac, and you only pick at least one or two. Early game, I also like to buy a Dark Seal to that early potential snowball with stacking AP, but you always sell Dark Seal later on though. So before we move on to my example builds, I will go through the items briefly. So Deadman's Play can be a bit confusing for beginner players, so I'll explain to you what it is. So when you move around the map, you will gain stacks that can accumulate up to 100, which can then be consumed by auto-attacking the enemy. No matter how many stacks you have, you'll deal a slight increase in damage and slow the enemy briefly. but the more stacks you have, obviously the better. This item also gives you armor and HP, making it a good choice against AD based champions. And the difference between Deadmans and Randuins is that when you buy this item, you get armor and HP as well, but you also reduce the enemy's critical strike damage, which means it's really good against champions like Yasuo or Caitlyn. So if you see the enemy team go for a lot of crit items, you know that you'll buy Randuins instead of Deadman's Plate. This item is really good because it's one of the few defensive items that actually deals damage to the enemy. So Thornmail basically reflects some of the incoming damage that the enemy deals through basic attack and then deals it back to the attacker. So for example, if I'm Zac and I have this item and a fed Twitch starts attacking me, Twitch will deal less damage but also receive damage in return. So now we'll move on to the magic resist items that you can go on Zac, and I'll first talk about Adaptive Helm. So Adaptive Helm is one of those items that you must have when you're against champions who have abilities that deal damage over time. For example, it is really good against champions that like to build Leandries. Two champions that this item is really good against especially is Rumble and Cassio. Next item I'll talk about is Spray Visage, and Spray Visage is actually one of Zac's core items in my opinion, that you should go either second or have somewhere in your build. Even if the enemy team only have one AP dealer, I would recommend going Spray Visage only for the passive. The reason why I say Spray Visage is such a good item on Zac is not only because of the HP and magic resist and cooldown reduction, but also the healing, which works perfectly with Zac's kit. For the AP items, you can basically go Morello, Rylai's, Leandries, Banshees, and Protobelt. The most common AP item that I build is Leandries. Leandries works perfectly in Zac since it deals magic damage over an extended period, and since Zac is a champion that where you try to survive for a long time in a team fight, walking around, picking up your blobs, it works really good as well. When it comes to Morello, I like to go the item if my team doesn't build enough anti-healing and I need to help out if I go against a Vlad, Sorak, or a Mundo. So next I'll be talking about my example builds that I've created for you guys, and if you go against a team with a lot of armor and especially a lot of crit, I would recommend going Cinderhulk, Ninja Tabi, Randuins, Womog, Thornmail, and for the last item, that could be a little bit of a situational item actually. You can either choose to go Deadman's Plate for that extra HP and armor, or you can also choose an AP item such as Morello for the anti-healing or Leandries. If the team that you go against have majority AD but maybe have like one person that goes AP, I could also recommend building a Spray Visage or a Adaptive Helm. Example build number 2 for magic resist is Cinderhulk, Mercury Boots, Spray Visage, Womogs, Adaptive, and for the last item you could either go Stone Plate if an enemy have some AD, or you can also go Locket for that extra peel, or an AP item such as Morello, Leandries, etc. The build that I like to go is a mix of AP and tank items, and I usually build Cinderhulk into boost depending on the enemy, so either Mercury Boots or Ninja Tabi, and then I usually go with Spray Visage or Leandries second, and then most likely Womogs and Randuins. Do keep in mind that these are only example builds and you should always buy items depending on the enemy team. So the next topic that I'm going to be talking about is Zac's weaknesses and strengths. The thing with Zac is that he's very weak early game compared to a lot of other champions. For example, Zac cannot really contest objectives early or 1v1 other junglers except maybe some tanks. Even if this is a weakness, there is a way to play around it. For example, you see enemy jungle Olaf running up to you. You don't go for that scuttle, okay? You run to the other one. The only exception for this is if you have priority in mid and maybe bot side, so your laners can come and help you. But most scenarios, this doesn't really happen and you should just skip that scuttle and move to the next one, or go back in the jungle and farm. And the thing with Zac, you can't gank before level 3. There's no point wasting time and gank level 2. And if you do get bullied in the jungle early with the enemy jungler constantly invading you, the best thing to do in this scenario is to buy control wards first off. And another thing you can do is also vertical jungling, because the enemy jungler is going to be so focused on trying to track you down and take your jungle camps that he's not going to take his jungle camps. So now when we've gone through Zac's weaknesses, it is now time to convince you why Zac is one of the most underrated jungle champions in the game. Zac is one of the best CC kits of all champions. 3 out of 4 abilities are pure CC, and on top of that he scales very well with AP, making him almost a raid boss if ahead. I think with Zac as well that you don't only need to buy tank or AP, you can also go support items, which make him a really good peel for anyone on the team. Another good thing with Zac is that you can gank from almost everywhere, as I showed you on the map where I pointed out everywhere you could gank from. Another good thing with Zac is that you basically have 2 lives. Even if the enemy team pop your passive, if your allies teleport or are able to protect your blobs, you basically don't die. And the last reason why you should play Zac is because he's very cute. For the next topic that I'll talk about, I will go through which champions to ban and champions that Zac has good synergy with. So good bans for Zac are Janna, Veigar, Morgana, Poppy, Vlad, Lulu, Thresh, and Pyke. I would suggest picking one of these to ban when you play solo queue. The reason why I chose these champions was because all of these have some kind of way to completely deny Zac's engage tool. So the champions that Zac has good synergy with are basically Alistar, Galio, Soraka, Yuumi, Yasuo, Nautilus, Leona, and Malphite. Any second engage champion is always good, because he really sucks when Zac is the sole engage on the team. I always like having Soraka and Yuumi on the team because their extra healing can make you survive for so long. And next I'll go through champions that are really hard to gank, that sometimes there's no point even trying to gank the lane because it won't work anyway. And champions like that is basically Fizz, Aurelia, Fiora, LeBlanc, Katarina, Lissandra, and Vlad. The reason why these champions are hard to gank is because they either have a lot of dashes or can easily avoid your engage. But saying this doesn't mean you should never gank a Fizz, Aurelia, and Fiora, and LeBlanc, etc. I'm just saying that these are going to be harder to gank than other champions. And last but not least, the enemy jungle champs that are hard to play against. And these champions are basically Xin Zhao, Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, Olaf, Masji, Jarvan, Kha'Zix, Trundle, Shaco, and Hecarim. And the reason why I've named so many is because basically any AD aggressive jungler early is going to be a threat to Zac. But do keep in mind that even if there are a lot of champions that are better than Zac early, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll win automatically, because it really depends on the player as well. AP junglers and other tank junglers aren't really a problem early at all, and you should be able to contest a scuttle, for example, against an Evelynn. So the next thing I'll talk about is tips and tricks on Zac. So as you can see in one of the jungle paths that I went through, you actually do take Gromp and blue buff at the same time, and here I'll show you how to do it. So first you want to auto attack blue buff, Q Gromp, and Q them into each other. Next you want to do is just use your W and pick up your blobs. Since you're level 2, you're gonna have to smite blue buff, and then you just finish off taking Gromp. The second trick that I'll show you is that you can actually use your Q on a lot of things on the map. So let's say that the enemy is right here. What you can do here is you Q them and then Q them into honey fruit. Another thing you can do is that if the enemy team has a control ward or any type of ward, let's say there's a ward in this bush right here and you have a sweeper. What you can do here is you can actually Q the enemy into their own control ward or a normal ward. Another thing you can do is that you can actually use the blast cone as well. So let's say your enemy is right here. What you can do here is you cue the enemy into the blast cone. The next trick I'll show you is that if there is more than one target. The next trick is if you have ultimate, you can basically do a insect on Zac if you would like to. So in order to do this, you want to R and then flash. Another cool thing that you can do with Zac is, let's say you're playing against a severe or a champion that has banshees or Malzahar. What you can do here to avoid their shield is that you basically, while you jump in mid-air, you smite them. This way the smite will remove the shield and your E will hit them. Another trick you can do is jumping over Baron Pit and Dragon Pit. So let's say the enemy team is doing Drake. You can walk up here and around 2k-ish, stop charging up your E, jump over, smite, mid-air. And last but not least, I'll show you the most OP Zac trick, or should I call it bug, that I know of, which is called the Running Man. This can only be made from bushes. You can only do this bug from bushes. So let's say this is awarded and the enemy mid laner is right here. What you want to do here is you want to control E real quick and then E right away after. This way, when you E on top of the enemy mid laner, it will look something like this. This is just how I figured it out, how it works for me. There are most likely a lot of different ways that you can do this. So in conclusion, what you want to do in order to achieve Running Man, you want to control E, E, and then jump on top of a target. So for the last topic I'll talk about, we'll be going through general jungle tips for Season 10. So what you want to do, as I've gone through in my guide, you want to gank topside first before Drake spawns at 5 minutes to get that top early pressure, because the rest of the laning phase you will want to focus mid and bot side for the Drakes. And this season you can't really waste time at all since they removed the catch up XP in the jungle. I've also put the timers here for Herald Drakes and small camps in case you didn't know. But now we reached the end of the video, and thank you so much for watching my guide. If you have any further questions, either feel free to join in on my Twitch whenever I stream or comment down below. And I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.